Jumping right in, if you go to the query editor and look at the Home tab, you'll see all sorts of basic table transformation options. Let's talk through some of the most common and frequently used ones. First off, you can choose to keep or remove certain columns or rows from a table. And there are a few interesting options here. Looking at the column options, you can either select the columns that you'd like to remove or select the columns that you'd like to keep. Now, that might not seem like a really important distinction, but it can be very helpful in certain cases. So let's say that you've got a data connection to a table that might have a variable number of columns. Let's say 1 month the table has 10, and then the next month it has 20. But at the end of the day, you always want to keep the same set of 5 columns. If you were to open up the query editor and manually remove each of the columns that you don't want, then any new columns that appear won't be accounted for and will ultimately end up in your final table, which is what you don't want. On the other hand, if you select the 5 columns that you always want and say, hey, Power BI, these are the 5 columns that I need, anything else that you run into or find in that table, just remove it. All right, so taking this approach, you'll be good to go moving forward regardless of the other columns that are present within the table. I know it's a bit of a nuance, but it's actually a really helpful tool when you run into these types of use cases. Now, as far as rows are concerned, you've got some basic options here. You can remove the top rows or bottom rows. You can set a specific number of rows to keep or remove. And this is really helpful if you have files that might have header rows or footers or totals that you need to strip out. Other options here, you can remove alternate rows or you can remove duplicates. And that could be a great way to actually create a new lookup table from scratch by creating a unique list of IDs. You'll also find some basic sorting options like A to Z or low to high, as well as options to change your data types or promote your header rows. Now, Power BI is actually pretty smart about headers, and by default, it should identify and promote those header rows for you, but in case it doesn't, you can always do it manually using these tools here. And then the last thing I want to call out, if you right-click any column header, you can access a lot of these same common tools, plus you can do things like duplicate, move, or rename columns. And this is a common theme that we'll see time and time again as we work with the query editor, which is that the same tools are often available in multiple places, in multiple menus, multiple tabs, sometimes even in multiple views within Power BI. So with that, let's head back over to our AdventureWorks report, and we're going to connect to our product lookup data. So like I've mentioned, there are multiple ways to connect to data in Power BI. And from within the query editor, new source is going to open the get data menu. And we can click the bottom of it to see some of the most common options here. We have our text and CSV option. And if we click more, Power BI is going to launch that same get data interface. Right? And all we need to do is click text CSV and then connect. Right? So multiple ways to accomplish the same thing. So from here, we're going to locate our product lookup. All right, so AdventureWorks product lookup, and we'll open this. Like we talked about, this process becomes very easy. It's a very repeatable thing, and you'll get very used to doing this over and over again. So we're brought back into our data preview window, file origin, our comma delimiter, the data type detection based on our first 200 rows. Again, we're going to dig into all of this within the query editor, but overall, this looks like what I would expect to see from this kind of data set. So we'll click OK, and this is going to add this into the query editor. So now over here on the left-hand side, we've got both of our queries, right? We've got our territory lookup table, and we see our preview here. We have our couple of applied steps that automatically happen. And we've got our AdventureWorks product lookup table. Same thing. All right, so we've got our query over here, our data preview. We've got our applied steps, our file name. And one of the things that I want to quickly look into is what exactly is happening with these applied steps, right? We've got a source, promoted header, and change type applied step. So because these are all individual, we can click into each one of these and see exactly what's going on, right? And if I expand my formula bar, and we've got this M code here that's saying, hey, we've got this CSV document. Here's its location, right? And this is going to be unique to me. Right? So this is my file drive location. And here's the delimiter, the number of columns, the file encoding, right? So this is all of the data that Power BI needs about the source. The next thing that it looks at, as you can see here, we've got column 1, column 2, column 3, is it says, hey, I recognize that the next row here is actually the header rows. So I'm going to promote those to the header row, right? So now we have product key, product subcategory key, product SKU, product name, and so on. And if you look at all of these data types on the left-hand side here, right, they're all text-based, right? You can scroll over and you'll see that these are all text-based. So the next thing that Power BI does is it says, all right, based on the first 200 rows of this file, I think that these are the most appropriate data types to assign to each one of these columns. So we've got our product key here set up as an integer, our product subcategory key, same thing, as a whole number or an integer value, right? We've got product SKU as a text-based column. We scroll over to the right here, again, a bunch of other text-based columns. And then we get to the end of the data set here and we see 2 columns, product cost and product price, right? And these are being assigned as decimal numbers. Again, so Power BI is going through and scanning the first 200 rows of this table and it's saying, all right, here's my best guess at what these different data types are. So that's what those applied steps are all about. Now, every time I connect to a brand new data set, I always like to start with 2 steps. The first step is to rename the file, right? So we're going to delete the AdventureWorks portion of this and we're just going to call it product lookup. The lookup portion of this is going to be important once we get to the data modeling section. Chris is going to talk through why we name our tables that way and how it's important. The next thing that I like to do is really go through and make sure that all of the data types here are assigned appropriately, right? And we've kind of already done that, right? We confirmed that the product key, subcategory keys, these make sense as whole numbers. Everything that looks like it should be a text-based value is. So we'll kind of scroll through these again. And then the one thing here that we can do is our product cost and product price columns. These defaulted to a decimal number, again, which isn't inaccurate, but we can actually be a little bit more accurate, right? So these are actually currencies, right? And that data type within Power Query is referred to as a fixed decimal number. So we could click fixed decimal number, and this is going to add a new step and change our data type, right? So instead of it being a decimal data type, we're changing it to currency. The other way that we could do this is we're going to delete that last applied step. And I'm going to select both of these columns. And then I want to head up here to the transform, to my data type, and then fixed decimal number. And we'll add this as a new step. Right? And so now this new change type 1 step is saying, hey, we want to change or we want to transform these column types of product cost and product price both to currency. So really cool that we can do that. One other thing that we could do here real quick is we can right click on this step and rename it. And so let's rename this to change to currency. Right? So now this is a little bit more readable and we actually understand what's happening here. So overall, things are looking really good, right? There really isn't too much that we would have to do. We could probably load this file as is and it would be totally workable. But let's say, for example, that we want to remove this product size column, right? When we start looking at it, we can kind of see that it's a little bit of a mess, right? We've got a mix between some numeric sizes and text-based sizes, and maybe we don't think that it's going to be super helpful, so we just want to remove it. So again, there's multiple ways to accomplish this. We can right-click the product size column header and click remove, right? Or we can come up and remove columns from our header tools, right? So Power Query adds a new step here for removed columns. We can see the associated M code generated here. We'll just collapse that formula bar back. And there we go. So it's really that easy. So just to quickly recap, as a best practice, try to get in the habit of updating your table names and confirming your data types and their accuracy every time you connect to a new data source. It's really paramount for everything downstream of it, just to make sure that those are set up appropriately. All right, so far we have connected to this data set. We've updated the table name. We've confirmed our data types. We updated a couple of data types to currency. We removed our columns. So the next thing that we can do here is actually close and apply these changes, right? And what this does is this actually is going to load the data into the data model, and we'll see that in the front end of Power BI. All right, so now that that's finished loading, over here we've got both of our product lookup and territory lookup data sets. We can head over into the data view, and same thing, we can see the product lookup and territory lookup data sets here. And then if we jump over into the data model view, I will scroll out real quick so we can see both tables. And within the data model view, we can see that we have added both the territory lookup and product lookup tables here. All right, congratulations. You've just loaded your first two tables into your data model. From here, our last step is to really just save our work. And from here, you're good to go.